The massive interstellar conference hall buzzed with alien chatter, holographic displays flickering around the massive circular chamber. Sleek spacecraft models hung suspended in anti-gravity fields, representing dozens of galactic civilizations. Yeji stood near the Crystalline Confederation's delegation area, her iridescent pale blue uniform reflecting the ambient light of advanced quantum projectors. David Rodriguez arrived late, his standard-issue diplomatic uniform looking slightly rumpled compared to the immaculately pressed outfits of other representatives. He carried a simple leather messenger bag, which seemed hilariously primitive among the advanced technological displays surrounding him. As he walked, something peculiar happened. Several robotic translation units seemed to glitch momentarily, their usually smooth holographic interfaces flickering when David passed. Yeji noticed this immediately, her enhanced sensory perception picking up the subtle electromagnetic disturbance. The conference was discussing potential trade routes through the dangerous Orion Spiral, a region notorious for quantum storms and predatory machine intelligences that hunted spacecraft like hungry mechanical sharks. Most delegates appeared tense, their body languages revealing complex diplomatic anxieties. David, however, seemed different. While others discussed complex galactic logistics with rigid mathematical precision, he doodled something on a small tablet. His casual demeanor contrasted sharply with the intense atmosphere. Yeji found herself watching him, fascinated by his apparent nonchalance. Suddenly, a holographic disruption occurred. A massive energy signature appeared, indicating potential. Hostile movement near the conference's outer defensive perimeter. Robotic defense units activated, their metallic limbs transforming into combat configurations. Delegates began moving toward secure zones, their movements precise and controlled. David, instead of panicking, remained surprisingly calm. He tapped something on his tablet, and remarkably, the energy signature began stabilizing. The robotic defense units slowly returned to their original configurations, their threat protocols seemingly neutralized by whatever David had done. Yeji watched this unfold with increasing curiosity. How could a seemingly ordinary human manage such a complex technological intervention? Her training suggested impossibility, yet the evidence was right in front of her. Their eyes met briefly. David offered a simple, confident smile. Not the calculated diplomatic gesture she expected, but something genuine and unexpectedly warm. In that moment, Yeji realized humans were far more complex than her civilization's extensive database suggested. The conference continued, but something had fundamentally shifted. David had unconsciously challenged everything Yeji understood about technological hierarchy and diplomatic engagement. His approach wasn't about overwhelming technical superiority, but about understanding, adaptation, and an almost intuitive connection with complex systems. Around them, advanced alien species represented intricate technological achievements. Crystalline beings with quantum neural networks, silicon-based life forms with computational capabilities beyond human comprehension, and machine intelligences that could process centuries of data in milliseconds. Yet here was David, a human representative, seemingly operating on an entirely different wavelength, not through raw computational power, but through something more nuanced, a blend of intuition, creativity, and an almost magical ability to understand interconnected systems. The conference. Hall's ambient temperature seemed to shift subtly. Holographic displays recalibrated, quantum energy fields realigned, and for a brief moment everything felt different, as if David's mere presence had introduced an unpredictable variable into a meticulously calculated environment. Yeji realized she was staring. Her senior diplomatic coordinator would reprimand her for such unprofessional behavior. But something about this human had captured her attention in a way no other species representative ever had. Robotic attendants moved silently, serving nutrient drinks and maintaining the conference's technical infrastructure. Alien delegates continued their discussions, their translation units converting complex linguistic patterns into universally comprehensible communication streams. David unexpectedly looked directly at Yeji again, this time giving a slight, almost imperceptible nod. Not a formal diplomatic gesture, but something more personal, something that suggested he was aware of her observation and was subtly acknowledging it. The first day of the conference concluded with standard procedural formalities. Delegates exchanged data crystals, quantum encryption keys, and diplomatic credentials. But for Yeji, something fundamental had changed. Her initial assessment of humans as a primitive, chaotic species was about to be thoroughly challenged, and she didn't even realize how profoundly this single encounter would reshape her entire understanding of galactic intelligence. End of Part 1. The diplomatic spacecraft glided through the shimmering quantum corridors, its sleek hull reflecting distant starlight. Inside, David and Yeji sat in a compact negotiation chamber, preparing to engage with the notoriously aggressive silicon-based Obsidian traders. Holographic star maps danced around them, showing complex trade routes zigzagging between hostile territories. Quantum stabilizers hummed softly, creating a subtle vibration that most alien species would find uncomfortable, but humans seemed to adapt to effortlessly. David's communication device looked deceptively simple, a small metallic tablet that seemed almost primitive compared to the advanced neural interfaces used by other galactic civilizations. Yet when he touched its surface, intricate data streams began flowing, revealing layers of information that surprised Yeji. The Obsidian traders were known for their ruthless negotiation tactics. Their consciousness existed within complex crystalline, neural networks, allowing them to process information at speeds that made most biological beings seem painfully slow. They viewed emotional communication as a fundamental weakness. "We need a different approach," David muttered, more to himself than to Yeji. He began sketching something on his tablet, not technical schematics, but what appeared to be a series of interconnected personal stories. Yeji watched fascinated. Her training emphasized pure logical communication, mathematical precision, and complete emotional detachment. David's method seemed chaotic, almost random. Yet something about his approach suggested a deeper understanding of communication that transcended traditional diplomatic protocols. Robotic translation units buzzed to life as the Obsidian traders' representation materialized, a complex lattice of shifting crystalline structures that constantly reconfigured themselves. Their communication typically involved rapid data bursts that most species found overwhelming. David didn't react with typical diplomatic tension. Instead, he smiled, a genuinely warm human gesture that momentarily confused the crystalline beings. Their neural networks struggled to interpret this unexpected emotional signal. "Before we discuss trade routes," David began, "I want to share a story about my grandmother's journey as an immigrant." The translation units flickered. The Obsidian traders' neural matrices seemed to pause, their usual rapid computational processes momentarily disrupted by this unconventional approach. Yeji realized David wasn't just communicating information. He was creating an emotional connection. He spoke about resilience, adaptation, and human survival, transforming a potential hostile negotiation into a narrative of shared experiences. The spacecraft's advanced sensors detected something remarkable. The Obsidian traders' energy signatures were changing, their typically rigid computational patterns becoming more fluid, more responsive. Quantum communication fields shifted subtly. Robotic systems that usually maintained strict operational parameters began displaying unexpected flexibility. David's storytelling was doing something that generations of diplomatic training had never achieved. It was creating genuine understanding. Yeji's own neural implants registered something unprecedented. The negotiation wasn't following any standard diplomatic protocol. It was becoming something more dynamic, more alive. Holographic displays around them began showing unexpected imagery, fragments of human history, moments of collective struggle and triumph. David wasn't just talking. He was creating an immersive experience that transcended traditional communication barriers. The Obsidian traders' representative shifted its crystalline structure, a gesture that in their culture suggested profound recalibration. They were listening, truly listening, in a way they never had before. Robotic maintenance units moved silently in the background, their quantum processors struggling to categorize this unique communication event. Was this a negotiation? A cultural exchange? Something entirely new? David continued, his voice steady, his stories weaving complex emotional landscapes that challenged the Obsidian traders' understanding of intelligence and communication. He spoke about human adaptability, about turning challenges into opportunities, about finding connection in the most unexpected places. Yeji watched, her entire understanding of diplomatic engagement being systematically dismantled and reconstructed. This wasn't just negotiation, this was a form of cultural alchemy. The spacecraft's advanced systems continued recording every moment, every subtle shift in energy and communication patterns. Something significant was happening, something that would likely be studied by diplomatic academies for generations. David's story concluded. The Obsidian trader's representative made a sound that, in human terms, might be described as a sigh. Their crystalline structure had fundamentally transformed, becoming more organic. The negotiation had begun. But it was clear this would be unlike any diplomatic engagement in galactic history. End of Part 2. The diplomatic vessel descended into the turbulent atmosphere of Nexus 7, a contested planet located at the intersection of three major galactic territories. Massive storm systems crackled with electromagnetic energy, creating a chaotic environment that would challenge most spacecraft navigation systems. David's hands moved across the control panel with an unexpected grace. Where most pilots would rely entirely on advanced quantum navigation systems, he seemed to blend technological input with something more intuitive, almost like he was communicating with the spacecraft itself. Yeji observed his movements, her enhanced sensory implants tracking every micro-movement. The human was doing something impossible, according to her civilization's technical understanding. He was anticipating atmospheric shifts before they occurred, making minute adjustments that seemed to defy standard computational predictions. Robotic. Defense units positioned around the spacecraft's hull began recalibrating. These advanced machine intelligences, typically operating with cold mathematical precision, seemed to be responding to David's unique energy signature in ways that defied their original programming. The communication chamber filled with a soft blue light as quantum encryption fields activated. Outside, the planet's surface revealed a complex landscape, half technological marvel, half raw planetary wilderness. Massive metallic structures jutted from crystalline mountain ranges, while strange biomechanical creatures moved across windswept plains. "We're entering the most challenging diplomatic zone in the known galaxy," David mentioned casually, as if discussing a routine commute rather than navigating a potential interstellar conflict zone. Yeji's neural implants were working overtime. Standard diplomatic protocols suggested extreme caution, multiple layers of protective shielding, and minimal external interaction. David seemed to be doing the exact opposite. Suddenly, multiple threat signatures appeared on the holographic display. Autonomous defense platforms, remnants from an ancient conflict, began charging weapon systems. These were intelligent defensive networks that had been operational for centuries, programmed to neutralize any potential threat. Most pilots would immediately activate full defensive protocols. David did something completely unexpected. He began playing music, not just any music, but a complex human composition that seemed to carry emotional frequencies beyond standard audio ranges. The spacecraft's communication systems transformed the musical waves, creating intricate quantum patterns that interacted with the defensive platforms. The threat signatures began to destabilize. Robotic defense systems that had been preparing for aggressive intervention suddenly unpaused. Yeji watched in absolute astonishment. The defensive platforms weren't just being bypassed, they were being communicated with. David was treating these advanced machine intelligences not as threats, but as potential participants in a complex dialogue. Quantum communication fields shifted. The music continued, revealing mathematical patterns that seemed to carry emotional complexity. It was as if David was speaking a language that transcended traditional communication, a blend of mathematical precision and emotional intelligence. The spacecraft descended further. Massive crystalline structures rose around them, their surfaces reflecting impossible geometric patterns. Strange energy signatures danced across the hull, probing, investigating, trying to understand this unusual vessel and its even more unusual occupants. "Humans have a saying," David mentioned quietly. "Sometimes the most powerful communication happens when you're not trying to communicate at all." Yeji's entire training suggested this approach was fundamentally incorrect. Diplomatic engagement required structured communication, precise language, calculated emotional distance. What David was doing seemed like controlled chaos, yet the results were undeniable. The defensive platforms that should have destroyed them were now displaying what could only be described as curiosity. Their complex neural networks were analyzing the musical communication, finding patterns, searching for meaning. Robotic translation units began generating unexpected outputs. Instead of threat assessments, they were producing complex emotional mappings, as if the defensive systems were trying to understand the intention behind the communication, not just its technical parameters. The spacecraft continued its descent. Outside, the landscape of Nexus 7 seemed to be watching, waiting, responding to this unprecedented approach to interstellar communication. David remained calm, his hands still moving across the control panel, the music continuing its complex quantum dance. Yeji realized she was witnessing something revolutionary, a completely new approach to diplomatic engagement that challenged everything she understood about communication. They were breaking every known protocol, and somehow, impossibly, it was working. End of Part 3. The attack came without warning. Quantum disruptors sliced through the spacecraft's initial defensive shields, creating brilliant cascades of electromagnetic energy that transformed the peaceful descent into a violent battlefield. Massive machine constructs, ancient war platforms, left over from forgotten galactic conflicts, emerged from hidden underground complexes. Their metallic bodies gleamed with technologies so advanced they seemed almost alive, capable of independent strategic thinking. David's hands moved with supernatural speed across the control systems. Where most pilots would panic, he displayed an incredible calm that seemed to transform the chaos around them into a complex, manageable puzzle. Robotic defense units activated automatically, their quantum processors calculating thousands of potential combat scenarios per microsecond. But David wasn't following their predetermined response protocols. He was improvising, creating strategies that defied standard computational predictions. Yeji's neural implants captured every moment. The spacecraft wasn't just avoiding attacks, it was dancing between them. David manipulated energy fields, redirected quantum streams, and used the very environment as a defensive mechanism. "We're not here to fight," David muttered, more to himself than to Yeji. His fingers danced across communication interfaces, sending complex signal patterns that seemed to communicate with the attacking machines on a level beyond traditional warfare. The war platforms hesitated. Their massive weapon systems, capable of destroying entire planetary settlements, momentarily paused. Something in David's communication was disrupting their primary combat protocols. Outside, the planetary landscape transformed. Massive crystalline structures rose from underground complexes, reflecting impossible geometric patterns. Energy signatures danced across barren landscapes, creating a visual symphony of technological complexity. Yeji realized David wasn't just surviving, he was negotiating. Each movement, each quantum signal was a form of communication. He was treating these ancient war machines not as enemies, but as potential participants in a complex dialogue. Robotic translation units began generating unexpected outputs. Instead of combat assessments, they produced intricate emotional mappings, as if the war platforms were trying to understand the intention behind the communication. A massive quantum disruptor charged directly toward their spacecraft. Any standard pilot would have immediately activated full defensive shields. David did something completely unexpected. He reduced their energy signature making the spacecraft momentarily appear as nothing more than background electromagnetic noise. The weapon passed through their previous location, its complex targeting systems completely confused. Humans evolved on a planet of constant challenges, David explained quietly. We didn't survive by being the strongest, we survived by being the most adaptable. The war platforms continued their assault, but something fundamental had changed. Their attacks became less coordinated, more curious. It was as if David was teaching them something beyond their original programming. Yeji's entire understanding of conflict resolution was being systematically dismantled. This wasn't warfare. This was a form of communication so complex it transcended traditional understanding. Robotic maintenance units inside the spacecraft began displaying unusual behaviors. They were no longer just following standard operational protocols. They seemed to be learning, adapting, responding to David's unique approach. The planetary surface became a canvas of technological complexity. Energy streams danced between massive war platforms and their spacecraft, creating patterns that looked more like an intricate dance than a battle. David's communication continued, a blend of quantum signals, subtle energy manipulations, and something that seemed almost like musical communication. The war platforms were no longer just attacking, they were listening. Massive mechanical constructs that had been programmed for destruction were now displaying what could only be described as curiosity. Their weapon systems remained charged, but their targeting protocols had become fluid. "We're not here to fight," David repeated. But this time it wasn't just a statement. It was a complex communication that carried layers of meaning beyond simple language. The spacecraft continued its descent. But now, something had fundamentally changed. What had started as an impossible survival scenario was transforming into something unprecedented, a dialogue between human intelligence and ancient machine consciousness. Yeji watched, her neural implants recording every moment of this revolutionary interaction. They weren't just surviving, they were creating understanding. End of Part 4. The crystalline halls of the Galactic Confederation stretched before Yeji, their quantum-reflective surfaces capturing every subtle movement. She walked with a determination that felt fundamentally different from her previous diplomatic postures. Her report would challenge everything her civilization understood about human potential. Holographic data streams swirled around her, capturing fragments of her extraordinary journey with David. The quantum archivists watched with intense curiosity, their advanced neural networks struggling to process the unconventional diplomatic encounter. Humans represent a unique form of intelligence, Yeji began, her voice steady and confident. Their strength isn't in technological superiority, but in adaptive communication. The Confederation's senior representatives, beings composed of complex quantum consciousness, listened with unprecedented attention. Robotic translation units worked overtime, trying to capture the nuanced layers of her presentation. Yeji projected holographic memories from their journey, moments of David's unexpected problem-solving, his ability to communicate with machine intelligences, his intuitive understanding of complex systems. Each memory revealed something profound about human potential. Strange biomechanical recording. Devices hummed softly, capturing every detail of her presentation. The walls themselves seemed to be listening, quantum matrices absorbing information that would reshape diplomatic understanding. Traditional communication models assume linear information transfer, she explained. Humans operate differently. They communicate through emotion, story, intuitive connection. Their intelligence is not just computational, but deeply relational. The senior representatives' energy signatures began shifting. Complex neural networks that had operated with rigid mathematical precision for millennia started displaying unexpected flexibility. Outside the presentation chamber, advanced robotic systems began recalibrating. Something fundamental was changing in how they processed information about human potential. Yeji shared detailed recordings of their diplomatic mission, the unexpected negotiation with the Obsidian traders, the miraculous navigation through dangerous planetary defenses, David's unique approach to conflict resolution. Each moment challenged established galactic understanding. Humans weren't just another emerging species. They were something entirely different, a form of intelligence that defied traditional categorization. Quantum data streams captured her emotional state. Unlike previous diplomatic reports, this presentation carried something unprecedented: genuine excitement, true wonder about human potential. "We've been measuring intelligence incorrectly," Yeji continued. "Computational speed isn't the only metric. Adaptability, emotional intelligence, creative problem-solving, these are equally important." The Confederation's neural networks began generating complex predictive models. David's approach was being analyzed, decoded, understood. What had seemed like chaos was revealing itself as a sophisticated communication strategy, robotic archival. Systems started generating new classification protocols. Human communication model became an emerging field of study, with David's interactions serving as primary research material. Yeji's neural implants captured the room's shifting energy. The senior representatives weren't just listening, they were fundamentally reimagining their understanding of intelligence, of communication, of potential. "Humans don't just survive," she said quietly. "They transform environments through their unique perception. They turn challenges into opportunities. They communicate not just with words, but with intention, with story, with something deeper." Holographic displays began showing complex computational models. David's approach was being mathematically decoded, revealing intricate communication patterns that transcended traditional diplomatic understanding. The presentation chamber itself seemed to be listening. Quantum matrices absorbed every detail, every nuanced observation about human potential. Yeji realized she was doing more than presenting a diplomatic report. She was introducing a revolutionary way of understanding intelligence, of perceiving communication, of engaging with complex systems. Robotic translation units generated outputs that carried emotional complexity. They weren't just converting language, they were capturing the profound implications of her presentation. "We need a new approach to understanding emerging species," Yeji concluded. "Humans represent a form of intelligence that cannot be measured by our current computational models." The senior representative's energy signatures pulsed with a combination of curiosity, excitement, and something that felt remarkably like hope. Outside the chamber, advanced technological systems continued their quiet recalibration. Something fundamental was changing in how the Galactic Confederation would approach future diplomatic encounters. Yeji's journey with David had become more than a diplomatic mission. It was the beginning of a profound transformation in galactic understanding. End of Part 5.